All right, we are live. Ted, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. Um, can you remind me of what you do?
That's a long answer to that question. I'm a microbiologist and an engineer, and I've done everything from building fail-proof communication networks to working on correcting blue-green algae outbreaks.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, so I've done a lot of stuff. Now I own a cattle ranch, um, and I designed and built an indoor climate-controlled vertical farm and we grow microgreens and edible flowers and things for restaurants. And
Oh,
I have a company called Agricultural and Environmental Applied Sciences where we try to rebalance the soil on today's farms. Uh, I don't know if you realize this, but in agriculture, most of the crops are facing various different diseases and pestilence that threatens their extinction. Citrus is on its last leg. A lot of people don't realize that, but citrus is almost gone
oh, wow.
due to a disease called greening. Um, and I years ago got involved, from human health when we began to understand the gut flora and that our dry weight is more bacteria than we are human cells. That led me to looking deeper and deeper and deeper into that aspect of it. It leads you right to agriculture, right? Because when we have poisoned the soil and destroyed the biome in the soil, the microbiome, and I can go onto a farm here in Florida and do a soil test to determine how much life is in that soil, and it comes back near zero, almost sterile. And then you wonder why plants are not healthy. It'd be similar to like raising a child in a bubble, right? And then
Mm.
opening the bubble and letting him out into the world. He's not going to live long. Um, and that's what we do on all of our monocropping farms all across the country. And they're more. You want to talk about animal rights? They are more devastating to animal rights than anything anybody else is doing. Just monocrop
Gotcha.
farming by itself, just that.
Okay, what would be the best alternative to monocrop farming as far as um, for trying to get as close as we can to the same outcome?
I'm a big believer whether we talk about human health, agricultural health, it's all the same thing, really. It's just health of life on Earth, and one thing feeds the other, right? Or vice versa. And so when I look at something like that, I don't ask the question, how do we do this? I ask first, should we be doing this? Right.
Mm.
So if we have a situation where the Earth the life on Earth didn't evolve in a way that 7 billion humans can intentionally plant plants in the ground and then eat them. The Earth
Mm.
does not support that. Um,
Mm.
and so to say, how can we do it, should we be doing it, first of all?
Mm.
Because there really is no way that you could grow the volume of grains. Just take grains, for example, which is probably the most devastating thing grown on the planet Earth. When
Mhm.
you look at the big picture, from everything from what it takes to do it, to getting it to market, to the effect on the human who consumes it. No
Mhm.
human should consume a grain of any kind ever unless it's fermented. I'm sorry about my camera. I
Mm.
don't know why it does that, but it's
It's
Microsoft
all right.
camera. Blame Bill Gates.
Sounds good. It's all right. I can hear you, so it's fine. Okay, so yeah, it's tricky when it comes to nutrition. So I'd rather talk in a way where we don't have to worry about the new nutrition ideas. Like more so, should we do this action if it is something that is good for us? So if we look at something, well, I guess nutritionally, like, what do you view as a good diet for humans?
I live on what's called the ancestral human diet, right? So when we
Okay.
look back through history, I look a lot at how did we evolve, right? We evolved for roughly 6 million years, and I mean, longer, depending on how far you want to go back. But as some form of sapien, we've been around for about 6 million years, and during that period of time, we have evolved a certain way for a certain diet, and we give up certain physical attributes and gain other physical attributes depending upon how we evolved. And so when we look at things like health, we have to look at what should we really be eating? What did we evolve to eat? And when I look back, and others have looked back at, for example, hunter-gatherer populations, and we have tons of examples of hunter-gatherer remains, and we don't find any example. In fact, there's one article that was in Journal of Archaeology, I think it was. I can get the reference for you. And I think the title of the article was, Did Hunter-Gatherers Get the Flu? And turns out we have no evidence that they were ever affected by anything like a flu. No evidence for any of the chronic disorders we see today. You can find evidence for parasitic infections, of course, but you can't find any evidence for any sort of these chronic illnesses. They didn't exist before agriculture. Humans did not get diabetes. We did not get cancer. We did not get heart disease. We didn't get these things. They just didn't even exist. Look at the Maasai warriors and some other populations on Earth that don't even have words in their languages for these things.
Yeah.
And we aren't supposed to get these things. We give these diseases to ourselves. And we do that by being the only species on Earth that eats another species' food.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think it's kind of a tricky thing to figure out because most of these issues come from outcomes of cramming animals into small areas. I believe. I think the flu might be from cramming like chickens.
Absolutely. That is as true as monocropping is bad.
Yeah. And so it's hard to know if the biggest issue is that this disease or viruses form from these animals together, or is it that if we become unhealthy by what we eat, then therefore that disease or virus can infect us worse. And it might be a combination of the two. And so, yeah, it's definitely complicated. But okay, so ancestral eating.
Ask yourself this quick question.
Yeah.
And I've asked this question in rooms full of academics, credentialed academics, and I've never gotten anything but bad looks and, irritated scientists. Where do viruses come from?
I don't know much about it. Okay.
We can answer that question about bacteria, fungi, protozoa. We can go through all the microbes. We can answer those questions. Where does a virus come from? And because they don't sexually reproduce, they're not a living thing. It's a lipoprotein wrapped around a little bit of RNA. There's no energy-producing molecules in there. There's no mitochondria. There's no life. It's just a particle, right? So where does it come from?
I don't know.
Not as anyone else, because you can't find a scientist who can answer that question. I've had scientists respond to me at a local well-known university, respond to me with, well, coronavirus came from a bat. And we know better than that now. But I said at that time, and this was back then, and I said at that time, okay, let's go with that. Whatever, let's go with that. Where'd the bat get it? And when we look at, for example, how do we create a virus to make a vaccine, we have to do that in a living cell. And we are told that a virus hijacks the machinery inside our cells to replicate itself, right? So where does it come from? And if you keep drawing that line backwards, you realize that we make the virus in our cells. There's not a virus making machine in the sky. They don't spontaneously pop into existence. Yet I can tell you the bacteria that is colonizing on you right now, colonizing on your desk, colonizing on your microphone, all that's happening right now. And we know why, we know where, right? Because they sexually reproduce, they're living things. Virus is not. By virology's own theory, it is not, right? So if they don't sexually reproduce, they can only use a living cell's mechanisms to replicate. Where do they come from? Living cell, right? And they don't move between species. They don't move between people. You make them as a result of metabolic disorder. For example, bird flu, big thing right now, right? Have you seen any dead birds on the side of the road? You see birds falling out of the sky, falling out of trees. The only birds that have bird flu are factory chickens, which is why I was going here, are factory chickens, right? I have tons of friends. I live in Okeechobee County, Florida, which is a rural county, cattle farms, and most people have their own chickens. I'm building a coop myself. And none of them have any sicknesses among their chickens. In fact, I buy pasture-raised chickens every week from another farm, Hershey's Hemp Farms, and they have like 600 chickens, I think, never had a sick chicken. Now they're raised outdoors the way chickens are supposed to be raised, and nobody ever gets sick. No sick chickens. The only sick chickens we hear of are ones in factory chicken farms.
Mhm.
It's a metabolic disorder, as you're saying, by putting them in a place where they didn't evolve to be, shoulder to shoulder, packed in close, no access to sunlight, which we know the devastating effects of no access to sunlight. Just look at typical modern health. And that's where these diseases occur. Same thing among cattle. When you put them all in a feedlot, shoulder to shoulder, standing in knee deep in their own feces, they're going to get sick. And it's a metabolic disorder. And sometimes it could be bacterial, fungal, things like that. Sure, those things do affect us. Absolutely. We're finding out that many flus that we have thought were viral turns out were probably fungal. A protozoa that we didn't know that could affect humans, we now know can affect humans. So many of these things we've always, it's kind of like, and I don't want to get religious, but kind of like the God principle where, God of the gaps, right? Where as we learn more, God's job gets smaller and smaller, right? Well, it's the same thing in microbiology. The more we discover in microbiology that could be parasitic to humans, the job of a virus gets smaller and smaller. So it's kind of the same thing. So that's kind of my position on all of it when we get into animal rights is, farming, human health, animal health, all these things are tied together. And people have said, for example, well, you can't get rid of all the grain farms and vegetable farms because we could never feed all the people. That's totally untrue. A couple of engineers did a study and determined that if you just stop growing grains and just use that land to raise livestock, pastured, not feedlots, pastured livestock, you'd have more than enough food to feed everybody in the country.
Interesting.
And
okay.
We made an evolutionary deal a long, long, long time ago. If you look at our closest cousins on this earth, gorillas and monkeys, you will see they have a large gut, as do all herbivores and ruminants and all. They have a large gut and a small brain. The two most energy demanding things in our body is our gut and our brain. And so those guys have a deal with nature where they consume nearly their body weight every day in vegetable matter, and they support a very small brain. But they need that massive gut. We made a deal long ago when we started as very little creatures. We started eating the marrow of bones from the kills of the alpha predators. And that began a process where a change began to occur, and our gut got smaller and our brain got bigger because we're eating more nutritionally dense food. We didn't need the volume that we did of vegetable matter. And then when we eventually got a little smarter and figured out how to cave in the skull of a dead animal, we began eating brains, being 70% fat, gave our brains a massive boost in size and capacity, intellectual capacity, and our guts got even smaller. Because on Earth, if you find those elephants on the island in Indonesia, I think it is, are really small little elephants, because they evolved on an island that will only support small elephants. Big elephants would have gone extinct, right? So Earth is built that way, right? And all life on it. So humans can't have a big brain and a big gut. We would be consuming too much energy for a singular individual of a species on this planet to support it, right? So we have to make this deal where we're either going to have a big brain or a big gut. And if you got to have a big brain and a small gut, you got to eat the most nutritionally dense food available, which is meat. And so that began our process, and eventually that excelled us up to being a top predator. And we began making our own kills and getting better and better and better and better at it. The screw up there, as much as the creation of agriculture, was when we began the modern processes of modern farming of these animals. That is a really bad thing. That is where, again, just like monocrop farming, when I eat beef, I eat my own beef, which are raised on an open pasture called the Great Kissimmee Prairie, and they're raised on that open pasture. They're 100% grass fed, 100% pasture raised. Most of the cattle raised around here in the United States, people don't realize Florida is the largest cattle raising state. But you don't think of that because you never see cattle from Florida, right? You don't see that on your labels, right? It comes from Idaho or Omaha or somewhere, because they take them at a certain age from here and ship them up to Idaho, where they are then finished in a feedlot. I would never eat that meat. And
Gotcha.
studies show that, and those cattle also aren't 100% grass raised. They're often supplemented with grains and different things. And when we look at, for example, the omega-3 to omega-6 ratios in milk, and we look at a grass-fed cow, the omega-3 to omega-6 and 9 ratio is almost 1-to-1. When we look at grain-fed or factory-fed cattle, the milk results in a 40-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to 9 to omega-1. I mean, excuse me, omega-3, which means when we look at the results of exceptionally high omega-6s and 9s, anxiety, depression, aggression, and long list of cascading other issues. So just drinking this factory-raised milk, aside from eating the meat, we are automatically so far out of whack with nature that it's going to have a derogatory effect on the human. And we see that every day. People that drink pasteurized milk at a grocery store are just drinking toxic sugar water. It shouldn't be touched, shouldn't be drank, should be thrown away. Shouldn't be allowed to be done. If you worried about animal rights, go to a dairy farm. It'll bring tears to your eyes, buddy. I have one right down the road from me. Oh, yeah. And every once in a while, one of the cows will get out and get on the road there and get hit. And everybody's like, oh, it's such a shame. And I'm like, no, man, that was muicide. Okay. When you see these cows, they are emaciated. You can see every bone in their body. They can barely, you go out and watch my cows, they run around and play. People don't probably realize that cows do. They run around and chase each other and jump, especially the calves, and jumping and playing, and they do all kinds of stuff. You don't see dairy cows doing that. They don't have the energy.
Yeah.
They're so badly depleted. Cows, I drink raw milk. Right now, raw milk is getting hard to get. This time of year, cows aren't having babies. They're pregnant. I mean, excuse me, they're not giving milk. They're pregnant right now. So they want milk, right? Well, in the dairies, they will artificially inseminate them in such a way that they're always giving milk all year long. You can't do that. It's just like chickens. Chickens don't lay eggs all year long. And when you have factory eggs, those chickens are being artificially stimulated with light to not, like, the change of lighting throughout the year signals whether they're going to be laying eggs or not. Well, when you artificially change the lighting patterns, the chickens will lay eggs all year long. Again, dramatically depleting the chicken, dramatically depleting the nutritional value of the egg, and causing metabolic disorder in these animals. So when you have a dairy, a chicken farm, all these things, you're asking for metabolic disorders in these animals, just as if monocropping is asking for plant diseases. And this is exactly what you get.
Yeah. Yeah, since you bring up chickens and eggs, I live in Oregon, and this year, or at the beginning of the year, January, Oregon and like 12 other states passed a law that all eggs sold have to be eggs that are from free range, cage free, or pasture raised. And so I thought that was a pretty cool thing that happened. I think close to half the states do it. I don't know if Florida does, but so I'm guessing that you would be in favor of any laws that would be changing factory farming to more of a regenerative farming.
Absolutely, as long as it's common sense and it's not, something that Bill Gates came up with. Okay, if it's actual common sense, and if you go to farmers and say what would work, and listen to those guys, you'd probably have some good answers.
Well, it probably depends on the farm, though, because if the farm is a factory farm that wants to cram as many in shoulder to shoulder as possible, you probably wouldn't want to listen to them. But I don't know.
Agricultural plant farming is never going to work. Number one, we did not evolve to eat those things.
Any plants? Yeah, because you said the ancestral thing. So we got meat, dairy, eggs. What else do you think humans should be eating?
A few fruits, if you are careful about oxalate buildup, and you also
some berries.
Let me back up a little bit. If you're going to eat a vegetable, you can, if it's fermented, naturally fermented. The bacteria in the fermentation process will metabolize the toxins. So then it becomes safe to eat, and sometimes even beneficial. And certainly the additional biology in the fermented food is always beneficial. People don't, okay, we can run, right? If you're getting attacked by a bear, you can run, right? All animals can run, fly, swim away, whatever. Plants can't. Nature gives everything a defensive measure, all life. has some sort of defense. These plants have a defensive measure. It's chemistry. A lot of it is based in biology. A lot of it has become, like, for example, streptomyces, the bacteria that produces streptomycin. That bacteria naturally lives in the soil and in these plants. Bacillus thuringiensis produces bacillus toxin, which is poisonous to bugs. It lives in the soil, in the plants, and on the plants. And that is nature's natural defenses for these plants against these bugs, in which we've stripped them of. And that's nature's natural defenses. Well, those chemicals will also make humans sick because they don't want to be eaten. Plants don't want to be eaten by bugs or us or anything else.
Yeah.
Fruit's a little bit different. Fruit is dangling itself up there saying, please eat me. That's why it's bright, pretty colors, because that's spreading a seed, right? Which is necessary to the plant's evolution, right? So that's an okay thing in most cases, as long as you're the right animal, because as Dr. Anthony Chaffee often says, just because that fruit wants to be eaten by something doesn't mean that's you, right? So
well, that's what I was going to go into, because there are definitely plants try to defend themselves. I watched this thing that was very interesting on plants developing like a fake insect on itself to make butterflies not lay eggs there because it'll look like one already had. And there's lots of interesting things like that. But there's plenty of animals that eat plants. And so even though there are defense mechanisms there, like on various grasses, cows will eat the grasses. And so I wouldn't think that the defense mechanisms would necessarily mean that humans shouldn't eat them. It would just be that if we discover through studies that those defense mechanisms negatively impact humans, because they might positively impact other animals like cows or zebras or whatever animals eat, giraffes, whatever eat plants.
Absolutely true. And you would then go back to the evolution picture and look at, like, for example, cows, your example there, you're absolutely right. They eat grass. They do not eat leaves. They do not eat flowers. They do not eat anything else. They eat grass. And if you tried to force feed them another plant, they would get ill, right? They just won't eat it. Rabbits eat a certain set of vegetables. They will not eat grass. A deer eat leaves and flowers. They won't eat grass. So it's not like all plants can be eaten by all animals. We evolve in a synergistic relationship with certain things. So Dr. Anthony Chaffee, again, to quote him, he uses an example of a berry in Australia that is so deadly that if you put it in your mouth, you'd be dead before you even chewed it. Okay? And it's poisonous to every known animal except one specific species of bird that lives only on that berry. And that berry seed does not germinate or it germinates in its gut. So it goes and drops that seed and that plant will then grow again. So it's spreading that plant around. They evolved in this synergistic relationship. Very extreme example of it, because that berry will kill nearly every other creature on earth except that bird. But that's very indicative of what the big picture really is. Cows evolved to eat grass. Don't make them eat leaves. They'll get sick. We probably had certain things we ate very early on, 6 million years ago. But when we made that deal with nature to go after bone marrow and brains and eventually meat, we lost the ability to metabolize whatever toxins we were originally adapted to. If you look at our teeth, look at the teeth of a cow. Their teeth are massive, big, flat surfaces. We don't have that, right? So we've lost, for one example, the ability to eat those sorts of things. I posted on Facebook several days ago a chart that showed how many pounds of spinach you have to eat to get the same nutritional value you would get from a ribeye. And it's a little skewed because you really can't, because it doesn't have any complete proteins. So it's never going to be as nutritional equivalent to a ribeye because it doesn't have complete proteins. But if you tried to make that balance, it's like 50 pounds, okay, to get one ribeye. So that's where that gut-brain swap comes in. We can't afford to eat a food like that. We're not supposed to eat all day long. And we have to eat those nutritionally dense foods. A cow has to eat that much grass. A cow they eat all day long. That's all they do is eat. A cow, interesting fact, a cow takes 60 pounds of plant protein and turns it into 100 pounds of animal protein. I mean, think about that a little bit. You know, that's a food factory in nature's world, right? What other purpose would there be to that creature? It's literally taking the solar energy from the sun, growing grass. You know, all food is just moving solar energy through various different forms. That's the way most scientists look at it. So you have grass, the cow eats the grass, we eat the cow, because the cow has that deal with the grass where it's going to be able to metabolize the toxins. So the cow is eating that grass, metabolizing the toxins, and then providing us with clean, healthy protein. And that's the deal we find throughout nature everywhere.
Gotcha.
Almost any animal on the Serengeti, you know, the gazelle is eating certain leaves and flowers that's allowing it to be a nutritious meal for some lion that is about to have lunch. And I think a lot of the animal rights peoples, and they're right, by the way, in many instances. I'm absolutely adamantly against the mistreatment of any sort of animal. That doesn't mean I don't shoot a deer.
Yeah.
But every deer hunter, if you want to find the people who love animals and respect animals more than any other human being, it's a hunter. And we go to great effort. More times the shot is not taken in America than the shot is taken. I don't think many people understand that if you're not a hunter.
Oh, gotcha.
Because if we can't get a good, clean, ethical kill, if there's any question, some bushes in the way, you saw part of the deer through a bush, we're not going to shoot. Unless we know we're going to drop that animal right there. We don't want him to see suffering. We don't want to run off wounded and get away. We want to drop the animal right there ethically and humanely, and that's how we do it. And hunters go to great expense to have the better scopes, better guns, better skills, train all the time to make sure that when we do that, it is done ethically and humanely. Nobody wants an animal to suffer, especially animal lovers like hunters and fishermen and people like us. So I view a feedlot as animal abuse. I view a chicken farm as animal abuse. I view chaining a dog to a tree all of his life animal abuse. I have 3 dogs. 2 of them are right here right now, Cane Corsos, and they're very happy little Cane Corsos.
Nice.
So,
yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest problems is like so you have vegans and then you have everybody else. And I think most vegans view everybody that's not vegan as equally the bad guy. And if they would talk enough with people that are not vegan, they'd probably discover that a lot of people have the same thing in common. They don't want the suffering. They don't like in your case, I highly support everything you're saying. I don't necessarily completely agree with the dietary side of things, but I do think you are making a lot of sense. But mostly the moral side of things. There's probably a lot of people that would want to support ending factory farming, but we don't talk about it enough because the people that probably think about it or care the most about it might be vegans, but those vegans are so against talking to other people like you and different people about it. And I think the most important thing to recognize would be exactly what you're saying, where like I would rather people go hunting or eat their beef from regenerative farms than to keep consuming the meat that comes from factory farmed animals. So would you say that would you consider it basically immoral for somebody to consume animal products that come from factory farms?
I don't know. I guess you could say it if they understood it. I think in many cases, ignorance is bliss in this case. You know, if they don't know, they don't know, and then they don't feel bad. But once you know, and you just can't do it anymore. I mean, I haven't eaten in a McDonald's in 35, 40 years.
Yeah.
You know, I just would never consume that sort of thing. You are, and that's why I like education and get the information out there, because when people become aware of it, they start avoiding it. When they avoid it, it's no longer a good product. That's where the market controls the product, not the product controlling the market as we have today. When we stop eating it, they stop getting paid Now they have
Yeah.
to make some changes, right? And that's
Mhm.
the way we make things happen. So the more education from guys like you that put this information out there and get people to see it and say, wait a minute, I didn't realize that's what they were doing to the animals that I'm buying hamburgers from at the local hamburger joint, or the ground beef or steaks I'm buying at the grocery store. I didn't know that's how they were raised.
Mhm.
Um, when they had mad cow disease, that's from feeding beef to cows, right? It's
Mhm.
prion disease. It's like we
Mhm.
fed people to people. I mean, who had that idea? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So certainly you can see the kind of levels they'll go to, and people just
Mhm.
need to be cognizant of it and avoid it and make them change it by making it worthless.
Yeah.
Excuse
Yeah,
me.
well, and I think if you're going to cause suffering, there has to be good reason, and which is why I try to find out everybody's reasons for why they think it'd be okay to, to breed and farm and kill animals. And I think the only good answer that exists out there is health. I think there might be some others. I think it might have been you that mentioned the idea of like fixing the soil and different things like that. So there might be a good
Well, they don't
argument
have to be
for.
contained for that. They don't have to be contained for that. That's just when
Mhm.
when we hunted the buffalo into extinction nearly, and we've hunted the large elephant herds and water buffalo, all the big herding animals that we have depleted to zoo displays. They had a purpose on this earth, and when you have these big, massive animals that used to run across vast areas of land, that breaks up the soil. Now, when you're breaking
Mhm.
up, anybody can tell you soil becomes crusty, right? Well, that breaks it all up. And that benefits so many different things from the mycorrhiza. And we have a whole episode talking about just mycorrhiza. Uh, when we talk about all this sort of thing, when you break up a soil like that, now you're allowing carbon capture to occur, and you're boosting the nitrogen cycle, which
Mhm.
is the natural cycle, which is why you don't get dead soils. Now we have so many areas that are just dead soil. Most of the topsoil's washed away, all these different things. And one of the big reasons is because we don't have these massive herds of animals now out there running around breaking up the ground all the time. And
Mhm.
that's a huge change to the environment when those animals went away. And so
Mhm.
restoring those populations doesn't mean they have to be farmed. I mean, they could just restore the herds of buffaloes, restore the herds of elephants, restore the herds of water buffaloes, and all these other animals that we have made go nearly extinct.
Gotcha. Just having enough natural preserved land with animals on it instead of
All the
turning that
federal
land into
lands and all
houses.
these things throughout the United States and the rest of the world. And most countries have vast areas of federal lands. Look at India. I mean, they have vast areas of federal lands that are bigger than most countries. So,
Hmm.
we could certainly do it. We could make a heck of a change if we wanted to do that. So, probably what will happen is Elon Musk will invent a robot that'll go around and stomp on the ground for us. But I prefer just having to restore the herds.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Gotcha. Um, yeah, it's interesting. Well, let's go to back to nutrition for a sec.
I wanted to because I was going to
What?
say something. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Well,
Go ahead.
what do you think of I mean, there clearly are plenty of vegans that are very healthy bodybuilders, sports. Like I I would say that the veganism, as far as health goes, has only been studied for like less than 100 years. So it's very important to recognize that we don't really know what the outcomes are going to be. But I'd say the same thing would go for something like a carnivore diet, even though we can speculate from the past as far as studies go. Most people in the past, let's say 200 years, have been eating a variety of meat and vegetables and fruits and whatnot. And so these are two things that I don't think anybody can claim we know for sure that eating just animal products with a few berries or eating just vegetables is going to be a good outcome. But we can look at plenty of people that have been doing carnivore for like 10, 20 years who are doing great on it and reversing a lot of their issues. You look very fit and healthy. I'm guessing you've been doing something like the diet you're talking about for a while. But I also know many vegans that have been doing it for 10, 20, 30 years, and they're very fit and very healthy seeming. Um, what do you think this is that's happening? Do you think that they're gonna die young, but they just can be fit now? Is it a genetic thing? What's happening here?
Well, it depends on your definitions of these things.
Okay.
When you say a vegan who is healthy and fit, I've not met one. There is a new disorder doctors are discussing now called skinny neck syndrome. And they've worked out the math for it and everything, where people, you'll see that their neck goes in from their jaw. And this is a common thing that's occurring in vegans. And it's how they discovered it. And so they've come up with a formula for calculating the diameter, the circumference of your neck versus your jaw, blah, 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 to determine if you have skinny neck syndrome, which is an indication of muscle wasting. And doctors consider it as a very serious condition. When you say a healthy bodybuilder or vegan, that'd be pretty hard to find. And if he is a vegan, he is heavily supplementing with a complete protein somewhere of some kind, whether it's whey, and again, that gets out of being a vegan, right? But he has to be getting a complete protein somewhere where you cannot go into muscle hypertrophy. So you've got to have the building blocks, and you only get those building blocks from animal products. So if you're a pure vegan, you're taking all kinds of supplements to prevent illnesses, because, I mean, you can even look at vegan magazines and stuff. They discuss the constant how to fight colds, how to fight flus. They're always sick. They have a very weak immune system, generally kind of not real vibrant when all the ones I've ever met. I mean, I can pick them out of a room. And so you have to really define what you're saying there. And when you say last 100 years, isn't it interesting that we aren't discussing vegans before that? Right? Why? Because people didn't do it.
I don't know if there were many. I mean, there's different speculation on how we evolved, but as far as like over the past like 2,000 years, I think people just would eat whatever you could get your hands on. So if you were in Ireland, you'd just be eating potatoes, and wherever people figured out how to grow as many grains as possible, that seemed to be. You know.
That's an interesting point, because when you say over like the last 100 years or last 2,000 years, what we eat today is so very different from what they ate even 50, 60 years ago. If you look at the common dinner when I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, you had a dinner plate, which was generally 10 inches, 9 or 10 inches. Today's dinner plate is 17 inches. Mm-hmm. So when we had a dinner plate, it was a meat and then a couple little, what we call sides, right? Well, now the meat is a side, right? And your vegetables and stuff are the bulk of the meal. So you say, yeah, they were eating a mix of foods, but not the way we do today. If you went back into the 1800s, the bulk of the human calories that they took in a day in the modern world, was meat. Mm-hmm. And unless you had really impoverished areas that for some reason had no access to meat, that was the diet around the world. Mm-hmm. And only in the modern times have we resorted to where the bulk of our diet is coming from carbohydrates, coming from fruits and vegetables, primarily grains. Grain feeds more people on earth today than anything else. And grain is something that the only animal on earth that should be eating grains are birds. We can't digest them, and it causes rampant cellular level inflammation throughout your entire body. When you are breaking down a grain in your body as best as the body can, you're doing it through attacking it. It's doing it through an immune action. It's not doing it through digestive action. So it causes inflammation throughout your body. It's one of the most destructive foods a human can eat is a grain. And don't get me wrong,
real quick, just
I like more than a bowl of spaghetti or some Italian bread. Yeah, I love it. But again, if we ferment those grains, they become edible.
Gotcha.
Because the bacteria will break down the glutens and the other chemicals in there that are bad for us will get broken down by the bacteria. Just like a cow breaks down the poisons in the grass and turns it into meat, the bacteria will break down those toxins and provide us with a safe food to eat. But that's a process that's expensive for factories to do, and they don't see it as necessary because when people chew their bread, they don't die chewing it. Okay.
Gotcha.
Remember, there's millions of people on Earth today that live on catawba root, right? Mm-hmm. And in its natural form, any animal that takes a bite of it will die taking a bite of it.
Yeah. It's like raw potatoes. Yeah.
But like many moons ago, the local Indians figured out that if they processed it enough times, they could get it to where it wouldn't kill you as you're eating it. and then it became the basis of the diet for I think like 5 million people. Right. Well, just because it doesn't kill you as you're chewing it doesn't mean it's good to eat. It's still slowly having a toxic effect on you.
Mm-hmm.
Just like everybody wants to eat broccoli. Eat your broccoli. You got to get your sulforaphane. Sulforaphane fights cancer. If you have cancer, sulforaphane will fight it. You got to get your broccoli, right? Nobody mentioned that sulforaphane also inhibits your thyroid's ability to uptake iodine.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, I don't know. I think if you are lacking iodine, then it can affect you negatively, which is where like goiters
No,
came
it
from.
inhibits the thyroid's ability to use iodine.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Relevant to the amount of iodine you have.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. Well, real quick, I'll tell you my diet, and then we can discuss that. But then I had a question for you about cows as well. But so for me, I've been pretty much vegan for about 8 years, and then about a year ago, because of some health issues, I decided to add in fish and eggs, and I added in fish and eggs for a few months. And I'm at the point where I basically have those removed now. I'm a type of person that I'm going to go along with the science, and I care about my own health. So if I were to discover, like that, say you were right, I would eat 100% animal products. I would just eat the exact amount I needed to be healthy, and I wouldn't overconsume. I wouldn't consume unhealthy animal products. Just I wouldn't cause harm to animals for taste pleasure. So I think we're
Right.
we're on the same line as far as that goes. I'm just not convinced that that humans need to eat in the way that you're describing. But you might be right. I'm leaving that open for that being a possibility. And then fun fact, I'm 122 days into completely cutting out all processed grains. So nothing with flour, no breads, no pastas, nothing processed grains, and zero sweeteners at all, whether they're 0 calorie or not, zero sweeteners. And this is, I feel very successful with this, and I'm very happy about this. And then also, most of that time I have gone without any heated oils, basically, but pretty much no oils at all. And so I've been pretty successful on my health journey recently. And so I just wanted to share that information as far as the process stuff goes. But really quickly, I wanted to ask you a question on cow. You were saying most animals, aside from birds, don't eat grains. If cows, or I guess in nature, it would be something more like an oxen or something like that. But let's just say a natural version of something like a cow or a buffalo. If they were out in a grazing area and different grasses went to seed, I don't know if they eat alfalfa grasses or what they eat, but if they went, or if it's like wheat or barley grasses or oat grasses or whatever, but if those grasses went to seed, and so in their tops there's the grain, would they not consume them if they had options?
They do get a very small percent, between 5 to 10% of their diet at a certain time of year. But that's even rare too, and depending upon where they're being raised. One of the interesting things is when a grass grows to a certain height, the protein stops existing higher than that. Okay.
Oh.
Like we have something called smut grass here. It grows in clumps, and the cows will eat it as long as it's 6 inches or less. Once it gets over 6 inches, they won't eat it. And you'll see the grasses, when they go to seed, go to a certain height where there's no longer a protein in there. So the cows are avoiding that. They get it incidentally, but they're really not after that. They're avoiding that because it doesn't have the protein they're looking for. They want the green, healthy, thick grass that has lots of protein. And that's generally going to be 6 inches or less in height. And they generally go to seed at a height higher than that, and the protein content starts to drop because everything gets donated to the seed. So it's not like something they go after or that they eat all of it. They get some just from being out there, I guess, but it's said to be no more than 5 to 10% of their diet.
Gotcha. Okay.
The problem is when you go to a factory farm and they're shoving it down their throat with a tube, and it's 95% of their diet now. That's when it becomes a problem for the cow. You will get a very ill cow when you do that.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. Okay, well, and then I guess one other topic. We're at about the time that we talked about doing, but I was curious.
Let me touch on one thing real quick, because I want to compliment you on your dedication to your diet. I wish more people would have that kind of dedication. I would tell you seriously to look at what I'm saying about animal proteins and animal foods, because when you are a vegan, I mean, you cannot argue the fact that you're not getting a complete protein. And you can look up anything you want to look up from any standard physiology books that will explain to you that you have to have complete proteins to build muscle. You have to have complete proteins to exact certain immune functions, certain repair functions. You will heal slower. And this is something we hear about from vegans all the time on ways they can heal faster because they heal too slow and things like this that occur. How many times have you heard someone say, I went vegan and my arthritis went away? I went vegan and my diabetes went away.
You actually hear, when it comes to like whole food vegan, you actually hear that quite a bit. I don't know how much of it's truth or how much of it's studied, but
yeah, if you're going for somebody who was living on McDonald's and processed boxed food, yeah, okay, that was just cleaning up, getting the processed garbage out.
Right,
sure.
It's elimination either way, whether it's carnivore or vegan. If somebody's going from processed to non-processed,
right, but it was somebody like you who went from a healthy diet, traditional healthy diet, and then you just stopped eating animal products and went only vegetables. You ever heard anybody say, well, I had arthritis when I was eating before and that went away when I became a vegan? You're not going to hear that. But I can show, and it's anecdotal, but I can show you thousands and thousands and thousands of cases where immune things like, what's the skin disorder, eczema, and all these different autoimmune disorders go away. Colon disorders go away. Crohn's disease goes away. Arthritis, and I don't mean, just gets better, goes away, right?
Yeah.
Arthritis symptoms go away. Diabetes goes away. Cancers go into remission or technically go away, which a lot of that is attributed to the lack of sugar, because sugar is the food of cancer. If you eat no sugar, you can't have cancer because cancer starves. Look up Dr. Tom Seyfried. He does some really good work on that and show that cancer is not a genetic disease.
You said Tom Seyfried?
Yeah, it's from Boston College. It's actually a mitochondrial disorder, metabolic disorder. And so when you look at diet like that, look at some of these things. Look up Dr. Anthony Chaffee, some of the things that he says. Dr. Saladino, the carnivore doc, who's not total carnivore. Most of us, if you came to me and said, I've got crippling arthritis, or I've got really bad diabetes, or I've got really bad autoimmune disorders, I would tell you go 100% carnivore, raw milk, meat, eggs only, no fish even, because they're so toxic today. Only those things until this thing goes away. But myself, I'm 65 years old. I've been pretty much living as most of my adult life this way. Modifications over the years as we learn more. Consume raw milk for the last probably 30 years, done all these things. And I work out all the time. I take no pharmaceutical drugs, never have as an adult. Not that I don't take them, I've never needed them. I don't get sick. My blood work, my blood chemistry, my blood pressure, all these things are perfect. My generally around 10% body fat. And like when I get off of here in a few minutes, I'm going to be going out to my driveway, which is a half mile long. And I will be picking up a 285-pound tire, stand inside the hole, pick it up around me, and I walk 50-yard laps for about 250 yards, and then I'll drag it with a strap for a couple hundred yards, do 100 push-ups, beat it with a sledgehammer a couple hundred times, and that'll be my workout today. I'm 65.
That's awesome. Okay. That's awesome.
So,
well, what do you think of?
I'm a vegan at my age that'll do that with me, and we'll have something to talk about.
All right. What do you think about Paul Saladino's take on fruit? Because he consumes quite a bit of fruit.
Yeah, he's right. He's absolutely right. And my diet is very similar to his, although I don't eat some of the things he does. He's very much along with me. Raw meat, raw milk, raw dairy meats, and then add some vegetables in. The only thing I would say to people on that is oxalates. You got to watch the oxalates. We do know how damaging oxalates can be. They build up in your fat cells. They're insidious, and they can cause everything from kidney stones and just cascading diseases. So what you do to offset that, though, is there's a bacteria found predominantly in fermented dairy, so kefir, yogurt, raw, naturally fermented, right? Because you always got to be careful that they're naturally fermented, not accelerated chemically, right? Because then you're not getting the same biology. So I've got to do the same thing. So naturally fermented raw dairy has a bacteria that metabolizes oxalates. So as long as you're getting some kefir, getting some yogurt, drinking raw dairy, you're going to get that bacteria, and you'll be able to metabolize those oxalates, and it'd be less harmful to you.
Yeah.
So there are
Gotcha.
ways
Okay.
of mitigating these things.
Do you think it's strange that I mean, if outcomes are good, outcomes are good. So it doesn't matter if something's natural. But do you think it's strange that we're the only animal that consumes milk of another animal? Like a lot of animals eat meat. And so it makes sense to say in our ancestral diet, we would kill an animal and eat it, just like a lion kills an animal and eats it. But to take the milk from another animal, isn't that a little strange?
We're the only animal that can,
Mm.
and we're not really
So
going
it might be healthy for some. Like if you took like zebra milk or something and a lion consumed it, it could be good for it. It just can't do it, so we don't know.
right. And
Interesting. Okay.
we do see interspecies milking. Does happen all the time. You see, puppies will breed off of cows. I mean, they will do that.
Oh,
If you hear me ask you a question, if you take a bowl of milk and set it down for any animal as an adult, will it not drink it? Because I can take my two dogs right now and put a bowl of milk down there. They'll both drink it.
yeah. Well, I think when it comes to domesticated animals, like humans feed them, and so they are just relying on whatever you put in front of them. But I don't know in nature if that would be the case, like, or if it would even be a good thing if you could put a bowl of like pasteurized dairy milk in front of
I
any
wouldn't.
random animal in nature. You're right, right. They might consume it because they're curious, but they also might consume a candy bar because they're
Yeah,
curious.
I'm
So,
not a proponent of pasteurized dairy or homogenized dairy at all. I
yeah.
think it shouldn't even be a thing. It should be out of our stores and out of our human diet completely. Um, Pasteurized milk, when you homogenize, which is equal, people don't even talk about the homogenization, which is equally bad. When fat no longer floats to the top, what did you have to do to that fat? You had to make it not a fat anymore. So you have to destroy the fat molecule, or it's going to float to the top just like fat does. Well, it
Interesting.
doesn't in homogenized milk because the fat molecules, the omega-3, and all these molecules have been splattered. They're not fat molecules anymore. Your body's not going to put them back together again. So it's a complete waste. You're drinking toxic sugar water and it shouldn't be drank, shouldn't be touched. Same is true with pasteurized and homogenized butter and yogurt and all these other things. Should not even be consumed. No reason for it. My raw milk, my wife will take because I get several gallons at a time. If I get one that goes sour, she takes that and either will make cheese or kefir or yogurt from it.
Oh, cool.
Okay, so my milk will just go from milk to kefir to yogurt to cheese, and it's getting
Interesting.
better for you each step of the way. Right?
Yeah.
If you did that with pasteurized milk and tried to consume it, you'd be deathly ill in a hospital, puking your guts up.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Gotcha.
that tells you everything you need to know, right?
Yeah, yeah, well, one last question because I know a handful of the people that are going to be watching this are going to be wondering this. But we're mostly, I mean, we're closest related to like say chimpanzees. You might have commented on this earlier about something to do with their gut being big and brains being smaller than us. But if they're our closest relative and they eat like 75% fruit, but they also eat like little bits, they'll have nuts here and there, but they eat insects probably for protein. They
Eat
eat
other
weird.
monkeys.
What's that?
Eat other monkeys too.
Yeah, yeah, little bits of other monkeys, maybe even like monkey brains. And I think like to get their B12, because like us, they can't make it themselves.
Right.
They like eat their feces, which we should definitely not do. But but what do you think it is about like why would our diet be so different from theirs? Maybe Saladino's onto something where maybe we've evolved to eat more meat, but we also are evolved to be heavy fruit eaters.
I don't know about heavy fruit eaters, but definitely fruit eaters. I think it's ridiculous to assume that early humans, in whatever stage you go back to, ever walked through a forest and saw fruit and didn't eat it. It's colorful, sweet, not the way we get it today. It's not, right? But
Mm-hmm.
to them, it would have been colorful and sweet. They would have tried it. They wouldn't have gotten sick immediately, so they would have kept on eating it. And that's why I eat berries. I have blueberries and raspberries and these things, and they're high in oxalates. Raspberries, very high in oxalates. But I also eat the fermented foods, so I'm not so worried about it. Um, so yeah, it's inarguable that fruits are something we do eat. I would never eat nuts, really high in phytic acid, which inhibits the absorption of minerals,
Mm.
and robs you of minerals and inhibits the future absorption of minerals. So I avoid nuts completely. Um, but fruits, absolutely, I think people should eat fruits. I mean, and again, you also have to have a sustainable way of living. You know, if you're only eating meat and eggs and dairy, it gets pretty boring, right? You're going to want to have some pineapple or an apple or some blueberries. You're going to want to have that. Do it just in proportion. A lot of it is proportion. What was the bulk of early human diet? Meat. Then they snacked on some fruits and berries and things like that. And that's the way we should mimic that, because again, and 2 points. When we go back and look at all the ancient bodies, we find we have no evidence of them ever. We don't see arthritic joints. We don't see any of these sorts of things. They lived a very different lifestyle. They didn't haul bales of hay around either, but we don't see bad backs. We don't see arthritic joints. We don't see any evidence of cancer or any of these things in even hunter-gatherers or Neanderthal bodies.
Yeah.
So we know that it's something we did. There's a change that occurred that made us sick.
Yeah.
And it's what we eat. So it's not necessarily that we shouldn't eat vegetables. We really shouldn't eat them at all, because they are loaded with toxins. And as Anthony Chafee pointed out, no one's ever shown, they talk about all these nutrients there are in vegetables, but no one's ever shown, literally prove that they have any effect in the human body. Because normally when we look at the molecules that we find in plants, they're not really absorbable by mammals. They're not meant to be. It's a different class of life. We have to methylate iron and boron and things like this. We have to methylate that before we can use it. It doesn't come in a methylated form in a plant. So we have to then donate methyl groups to be able to use whatever we consume from that plant, if you have available methyl groups, which most modern humans don't. Just through the way people live, they just don't have the methyl groups, right? That's why I take trimethylglycine, TMG. Everybody should take TMG every day.
TMG, I'll look into that. But yeah, I'd say it's a mixture of what we eat and also how much. I think the reason that 80% of the U.S. is overweight is because companies mixed with scientists figured out how to make all these processed foods become addictive. And then because they're addictive, people overeat them. And so if there was a way for people to eat these horrible foods, but in some kind of moderation that didn't make them overweight, that's probably at least that's better than being overweight. But I think the biggest problem is these foods are addictive. People cannot control their consumption, which is why I'm doing the thing I mentioned to you. I don't even feel tempted anymore by anything that has sugar in it. I eat fruit, natural foods that have fruit in it. But now that I've gone over 120 days without anything, I don't look at cake and donuts and all that and feel tempted anymore, where I used to just take it all down. I used to be 60 pounds heavier than I am now. And I really think that's the biggest problem is people are addicted to these foods, and they can't figure out a way to stop eating them. And so they overeat and get overweight.
Well, first of all, congratulations to you. Excellent work and excellent commitment to your health to get that change made. If I could convince you to start flipping over to more animal products, I would do it. But again, look at the results at the end of the day, when overwhelmingly everybody I've referred to, and I refer people to the carnivore diet when there's something wrong with them. When it's just, or if they're obese, because the fat just rolls off of people.
Yeah.
But you're satisfied. When you try typical dieting, you're eating foods that are fake foods still. And like you're saying about proportions, you're absolutely right. When we look back to the 1970s, the average American ate 19 pounds of butter a year or something like that, I think it was. And now we eat almost no butter, but we have this massive amount of seed oil. And seed oil is so insidiously toxic. On so many different levels, it is so toxic that, and most Americans are just eating it every time they open their mouth. They're just shoveling seed oil in there. Calling it seed oil is a misnomer. It's like calling petroleum a fossil fuel. It's a marketing term. When you say a seed oil, what you're talking about are industrial oils that are deadly until they've been refined so many times they aren't killing you when you consume it. But in its
Interesting.
natural form, if you consume rapeseed oil, which is what canola oil is, which was an industrial machine oil that they figured out they could refine it enough times that a human could consume it and not fall over dead as they're consuming it.
Mm.
That's canola oil. And that's true
Interesting.
with
Yeah, yeah.
all oils. And a good point, by the way, on something that's been learned over the last few years, been somewhat controversial, but the evidence is there, the science is there. The mainstream does not like it. That goes against their dogma, scientism. And that is, we've learned about ferroptosis, which is a form of cell death, a new form of cell death that we were unaware of. And it's ferroptosis because it's caused by iron. Iron kills the cell. And the way you prevent ferroptosis, and this is how they came to discovering this, is a new fat that's been discovered called C15. C15, when you look at your cell, nothing can make you sick unless it can get inside your cells, right? That's what sick is. Sick is when something got inside your cell and it's messing up the cell function, the cell's dying, or the cell's malproducing proteins or whatever's happening. So that's sickness. Something's affected your cells. And your cells have 3 walls of fat around them. That fat is primarily C15. Now, if you don't have enough C15, those walls become thinner and you get what we're calling today cellular fragility or cellular frailty, whichever way you want to say it. And now your cell walls the reason we have 3 thick fat cell walls is because you have to be fat to get through them. It'll keep out bacteria and other parasites and chemicals and things that aren't fat-based because they can't get through that fat wall, right? The only thing that can is bad cholesterol because that carries nutrients into your cell so that you can metabolize iron and boron and manganese and all these things out of your blood. Mm. So when that cell wall begins to get thinner and weaker, things can start getting in there and making you sick. And C15 comes from only one place on Earth, animal fat. No other way to get it. Highest concentrations are in beef and other, like lamb is high, red meats. The highest concentration among food products is going to be in cheese and specifically Pecorino cheese. But all raw dairy is high in it. Even goat milk is very high in it. So goat milk's fine too. But it is a critical fat to have. It is an essential fat. Well, we don't make it. So we have to consume it. And people that are on like a skim milk or no animal foods, no milk, no dairy, no cheese, no butter, you're going to have cellular fragility. This isn't a question. It's not a debate. It's not up for discussion. This is settled science. Your cells are going to get weak. And that's why vegans and these people have such a high propensity for flus and colds and sore throats and staph infections and these sorts of things because they have weak cells. So even if you're a vegan and you can just bend the rules enough to consume raw dairy, a lot of raw dairy, you'd be much healthier as a vegan if you just put that piece of it in there.
Okay, so it's mostly in there, but it's also in the meat.
It's in all animal fat.
Okay, gotcha. It's just high. It's just higher in the
highest concentrations are in red meat, specifically beef, and among all products, the highest concentration is in dairy and then in cheeses. Because you're obviously condensing it each time. You know, you're condensing it.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to look into that for sure. All right. Well, thank you for your time. I hope you have a great workout that you're about to have. And yeah, let's do another talk in the future. We'll do a follow-up.
We'll do it. I'm getting ready to go do a double shot of methylene blue, and then I'm going to hit the workout.
Awesome.
Methylene blue next time.
Sounds good. Take care. We'll see you.
Have a great day.